Why are they being so dishonest about the most important piece of evidence in this entire case? Hey guys, this is Jules with True Crime Reactions. Disclaimer, everything stated in this video is my opinion and my opinion only. And just like everything else in these cases we discuss here on this channel, everything is alleged. The knife sheath timeline, it's finally here. As far as I know, I have been able to gather all of the information needed to prove all of the inconsistencies and how they cannot keep their story straight when it comes to this knife sheath. And again, the knife sheath in the Idaho student murder case is the biggest and most important piece of evidence because it is the only evidence that the state can actually provide as factual. It is also one of the only things that the defense team has not tried to say is false. They have admitted several times that the DNA on the knife sheath is Bryan Kohberger's, but they are questioning its validity, they are questioning how it got there, and they are questioning the sheath in itself. But after gathering all of the inconsistencies that I could find, I can see exactly why they were questioning so many things. So without further ado, let's just jump straight into the facts. So let's start by taking a look at the very first information the public was actually given. Now, most of you guys know there's two PCAs. There's Brett Payne's and there's Dustin Blaker's. The interesting part to me about these two is that they are very copy and paste, minus certain things like credentials and something really super important, the knife sheath. Now, when it came to the arrest warrant for Pennsylvania, when it came to his parents' house search warrant, his apartment search warrant, his office at WSU's search warrant, Dustin Blaker's PCA is the one attached to all of those things. But when it came to the public finally getting information after he was back in Idaho, we got Payne's PCA. And Payne has had a really strange part in this entire thing, which is, again, one of the reasons why I have my eyes on him. I don't trust him. I just don't. So as you can see, the only real difference in the introduction paragraph of these PCAs is the length, because this is personal experience. We have Blaker over here that has over 20 years experience working in law enforcement. Then we have Corporal Payne over here, who's only been an officer for 4 years. And he's the one who ended up being the lead of this entire case. That makes absolutely no sense. But let's go ahead and talk about the original lie. They have told us since the very beginning that these two did not get to the crime scene until 4 hours after the 911 call. That has been a big red flag for me since the very beginning, because this, again, was the substance for all of the warrants, all of the actual actions that took place in order to incarcerate this man. All of this started with a technical timeline lie. And I don't understand what's the point of the lie. I really just don't. Let's read these paragraphs. On November 13th, 2022, at approximately 4 p.m., this one says, Corporal Brett Payne and I, and of course Payne's says Sergeant Blaker and I, and then it goes back to being the same, responded to 1122 King Road, Moscow, Idaho, hereafter the King Road residence, to assist with scene security and processing of a crime scene associated with 4 homicides. Upon our arrival, and this verbiage here is very important, the Idaho State Police ISP forensic team was on scene and was preparing to begin processing the scene. Again, keep that verbiage in mind because we're going to have to come back to it in a minute. MPD Officer Smith, one of the initial responding officers to the incident, advised he would walk me through the scene. He walked them through the scene, apparently. And Officer Smith was one of the first ones on scene. We're going to be going back over his supplemental report here in a few minutes. Here's the portion for the knife sheath. Blaker's. As I entered this bedroom, I could see 2 females in the single bed in the room. Both Goncalves and Mogen were deceased with visible stab wounds. I was later advised by ISP investigators they located a tan leather knife sheath lying on the bed next to Mogen's right side when viewed from the door. I was later advised by ISP investigators They, meaning the ISP investigators, located a tan leather knife sheath. Now let's go to Payne's because this is where it changes. His says, I also later noticed what appeared to be a tan leather knife sheath laying on the bed next to Mogen's right side when viewed from the door. So we technically have two different responsibilities here. Blakers makes it sound as if ISP told him they're the ones who found it. Payne's is putting the responsibility on his own self. And this sort of gets doubled down on because their new chief literally says it themselves.
Corporal Payne, when he did his first initial walkthrough of the residence, saw the sheath and recognized it immediately as something that we needed to take a look at and start processing. And when the Idaho State Police came in, they processed the scene. That sheath was immediately turned over, literally driven straight down to the Idaho State Police lab, forensics lab in Meridian, and handed directly to the specialists down there to begin work on it.
But the verbiage here is also interesting because it says, I also later noticed what appeared to be a tan leather knife sheath. So does that maybe insinuate that he was in the room as ISP was in the room and ISP moved the blanket? I don't really know because their timeline for them getting there is technically not correct. We know because it's said in the James Patterson book that Chief Fry knew about the knife sheath when Tyler Barrett called him to let him know of the situation. And I know that some people are cringing right now because, oh, it's this book. And I understand because I've dedicated a lot of time to debunking this travesty before sending it off to the winner of the book. But we're going to take this one as something factual because of one very important thing in this book. In the author's note in the beginning of this book, it states this: Moscow, Idaho Police Chief James Fry, now retired, generously gave his time and shared his insights on dealing with the most horrific crime of his career amid worldwide media scrutiny. Importantly, he did this without discussion of any of the specifics of this case and investigation per the gag order put in place by a local judge. The supporting details are drawn from public documents, including court records, and from elsewhere. Keep that part in mind because this book also mimics the 4 p.m. timeline for Payne. And I can't be mad because that was the official information that we had at the time. We did not know that we had been lied to about the timeline until the Idaho State Police documents actually came out. And we're going to get to those soon. Now, it's also really difficult to follow the timeline in this book. These chapters are maybe 3 to 5 pages each. Some of them are simple one-page chapters. They go back and forth in the timeline, into the past, into the future, some more into the future, into the past again. They do this to make you believe that there's substance, that there's something important. They confuse you by mixing up the timeline and giving you these little small spurts of separate information to really make you think that this is good. And it's really not at all. It really makes me rethink everything I ever thought about this man. But that being said, this starts off with Chief Fry getting the call from Barrett. And as we're going to see in Gunderson's report in the Moscow police documents, this call to Barrett, which in turn turned into a call to Chief Fry, is actually put in the report that Gunderson wrote right after the direction he gave to Nunez to shut the door because Murphy was still in Kaylee's room. And again, for some reason, instead of closing Kaylee's door where Murphy was, where there wasn't any bodies, they closed Maddie's door where her and Kaylee were found, which to me technically means they're disturbing the scene, but it is what it is. And the timeline for this starts with it being on Sunday, the 13th, and Fry is about an hour into the 4-hour drive back to Moscow. And we know that he got back between like 4 and 5 o'clock. If anything, this is before 1 p.m. because as it continues to go, it's talking about how he's now off the phone. He's been told that Payne is on his way and he's going to be there around 4 o'clock, which again, I can't fault the book because that's what the official document said at the time. But It also goes down to claim that after he's gotten a call from Chief Jenkins over in Pullman and denied his assistance, which again is a big thing that we've talked about here on this channel because it's a definite odd behavior change to what the normally is in that area between these two towns. Right after telling Jenkins no in the book, this portion is placed. Barrett's shared with Fry that a knife sheath was found in one of the rooms. It's imperative this doesn't get out, meaning to me that Chief Fry told them in the interview that as Barrett was calling and telling him the situation, he was also telling him that they basically found what they believed to be something imperative to the investigation and that it had to be kept hush, hush. This had to have been before 1 p.m. because he still has another 3 hours left on his 4-hour drive. Why are they lying to us about the time that the person that found the knife sheath apparently got there and about the time in which the knife sheath was actually found? And as you're going to see, even though we've been told from this new 2020 episode with the FBI guy who apparently helped and worked the case that the blanket had to be pulled off of Maddie and Kaylee in order for the knife sheath to be seen.
The comforter's over, the girls take the comforter off. Lo and behold, there's a knife sheath laying right there.
There's not a lot of mention of the blanket. Not in a way that would make you think that they were really covered up to their necks in a comforter, the way that it's sort of been put out there. The blanket is very sparingly discussed. So now we're going to take a look at the Moscow police records, the supplemental narratives that we got not long ago. We're going to look over the initial responding officers' reports for how they described the room on the 3rd floor, Maddie's room, when they first discovered it. This first one is Nunez. He was the actual first officer to get on scene. This is the one in the body cam that grabs the first aid bag, thinking there really is just an unconscious person situation. As the body cam continues, you can see that he drops it off next to the table that later Hunter Johnson places a knife on, and it basically stays there, and it's in a couple of the photographs that we see taken later on. You'll also see him mentioning Warner. Warner is the second officer on scene. They ended up being together going up to the 3rd floor, so their recollections are pretty similar. It says here, on the 3rd floor, Officer Warner and I found 2 additional apparently deceased females, both laying supine in a bed on their backs face up. One female showed an apparent traumatic injury to her face due to the basic facial structure being unrecognizable. That would be Kaylee. Both females showed very pale skin. Both females were covered in dried blood and apparently deceased. No mention of a sheath, no mention of a blanket, whether it be them being completely covered up or not. Now, we do know, again, from the first set of photos that we did get, there was a blanket on the bed. It'd be completely normal for there to be a blanket on the bed. But the main reason why it matters so much is because we've been told they had to remove the blanket in order to see the sheath.
Take the comforter off. Lo and behold, there's a knife sheath laying right there.
Warner's report states the following. On the 3rd floor in the southeast bedroom, I saw 2 clothed females laying on a bed on their backs who appeared deceased. One female on the left side of the bed in relation to the bedroom door had an extreme amount of lacerations to her face and upper body, which made her unrecognizable. Again, that would be Kaylee. The other female had multiple lacerations on her upper body and some blood on her face. I walked to the far side of the bed to determine if the female on the right was beyond help. I saw the female's leg was off the edge of the bed and it had lividity. Once I noticed the lividity in the female's leg, I backed out of the room. Again, no mention of a blanket, no mention of a sheath. So if you consider the fact there is a blanket in this scenario in some way, shape, or form, given this description, you can almost envision it as maybe just being up to where their midsections are, because it's obvious that he at this point is able to describe upper body injuries which would not have been covered up with the blanket. So it does seem like maybe the blanket was just on the lower portions of their bodies, and Maddie's leg seemed to have been hanging off of the bed, maybe even out of the blanket a little bit, in order for him to have been able to visually see her leg and her foot possibly. That's just sort of how it's starting to put itself together in my mind. Now we're going to look at Officer Smith's report. This one is really important because if you remember back to the Payne and Blaker PCAs, Officer Smith is the one in the PCAs that they say is leading them through the house because he was one of the first responding officers. This is how he describes the bedroom on the third floor. In a third floor bedroom, I observed two females laying in bed which appeared to have been stabbed to death. The female lying on the left half of the bed, as I looked at it from the doorway, was unrecognizable. Her face was completely disfigured and was stabbed several times. I was unable to comprehend exactly what I was looking at while trying to discern the nature of the injuries. That's Kaylee. Honestly, every one of these, they just get worse as we go. We just know how horrible it was. I can't even imagine what she actually looked like at that time. Yeah, okay, let's just continue. The second female on the right half of the bed had multiple stab wounds. The comforter was soaked in blood, and a pool of blood was still present. Now we can jump to Officer Snyder's report. Officer Snyder was the one that was assigned to take photos, and all of those photos are being taken as the event happening in the body cam is happening, as Dylan is being spoke to by Nunez, as Bethany is being spoken to, as we see Hunter Chapin walking up and speaking to Hunter Johnson, as we see poor Murphy being walked out of the house. These photos are being taken. There's no descriptions really at all when it comes to what he saw, the way that he maybe interpreted the scene himself. There's none of that in his report. Just the simple fact that he entered the residence with Gunderson, and we're going to read his report here in just a second. It says, with Sergeant Gunderson, I entered the residence to continue taking photos of the scene. I entered through the bottom floor main door on the north side. I took photographs of the rooms and living areas of the residence. These photos were downloaded onto a CD and booked into evidence. The photos were labeled in this report with a brief description of each photo. Now, the ironic part about that is that whenever these photos got released to the mainstream media, they did not release them, in their entirety, because there was well over, I think, 180 photos that were taken in this initial scene. But the ones that they did give us, which was between 20 and 30, I don't remember the exact number, but it was a handful. There was no description, no titles, no timestamps, and they also gave them to us in an order that just basically looked like they just threw them out randomly, like a confetti mess of photos. It was really poorly done. And as you'll see here, as we get further down, where we can see the actual inventory of the photos that were taken, we have the third floor landing on both sides, the west bedroom, the bed, the desk and the dresser, the dog kennel, and the foot of the bed. And then we also have the other side of the landing. We go into the bathroom area. Then we have Maddie's room, the cast off, the bedroom from the doorway, the bedroom floor from the doorway, a picture of both Maddie and Kaylee in the bed, pictures of above the bed, another picture of the two female victims, a portion of the closet, they have the floor, another photo of the victims, north and east wall, another photo of the victims, cast off a desk, and then bedroom west wall. There's nothing regarding the Sheath in Snyder's photo list. Now, this right here is Sergeant Gunderson's report. That's actually the OG narrative for the Moscow police drops. The very first document is like 29-ish pages or so, and it's a bunch of inventory reports with evidence numbers and different logs for different things. That is what this narrative was attached to, and we're going to look at 2 pages of that here in just a second. So for his description of the third floor, it goes like this. On the third floor, I went to the southeast bedroom where Officer Nunez and Warner advised they found 2 females whom I believe to be Kaylee and Madison. Both females were obviously deceased. I observed Kaylee lying on the north side of the bed and Madison lying on the south side of the bed with their heads towards the east. Kaylee and Madison were covered by a pink blanket, which was covered in blood. There was a large pool of blood near Kaylee's midsection. There was blood cast off on the east and north walls above Kaylee and Madison. Madison appeared to be laying up against Kaylee. Madison had what appeared to be wounds to her forearm and hands. Madison had a gash under her right eye, which appeared to go from the corner of her eye to her nose. Kaylee was unrecognizable as her facial structure was extremely damaged. So let's just dissect this a little bit. This is where I, basically had an argument with people about the pink blanket because in the photographs it looks beige, and in all of the Idaho State Police documents it talks about it being tan or beige. So Gunderson is really the only person that put this pink blanket perception out there, which is why whenever we got the photos of Xana's room, there being both a pink and a blue blanket, it sort of threw me and a few other people off because we didn't see anything about a pink blanket when it came to Maddie's room. So we were like, hold up, stuff obviously got misconstrued somewhere. And we do see proof of that, at least when it comes to Nunez, because Nunez has Kaylee and Xana mixed up in his entire report until the very end, where he clears up the fact that he had them mixed matched. So maybe that's the only reason why it got sort of like crisscrossed. But he is the first person to not only say that they were covered in a blanket, but then he also gave the color of the blanket. But notice that when it talks about this pool of blood that was still present, it's in the midsection. It's not in the facial area that has all of these horribly tragic injuries to the point to where she's completely unrecognizable. The blood is pooling in the middle, in the midsection of the people on this bed, which would mean the abdominal area. Now, again, they're mentioning wounds to the upper body, and again, Kaylee's horrible, unrecognizable injuries. But they're also not mentioning that the pillow is soaked or anything like that. And we've seen the spot on the pillow is really small for the kinds of injuries that they keep describing to us. I mean, this is horrible. But right after he directs them to close the door, he calls Captain Barrett. And look how early on that happened. So go back to what we just learned or what we just went over when it came to Chief Fry's timeline and the fact that at this point in time, Chief Fry is apparently being told by Barrett, hey, there's a knife sheath and we've got to keep it real quiet. But none of these people that are there, while the man who's telling Barrett what's going on, are mentioning seeing a sheath. So that just makes this even more confusing. The last portion of the Moscow Police Department records that we're going to go over for this timeline is the inventory reports that, again, are attached to the narrative from Gunderson that we just went over. If you look here, they are dated. They are in reverse order, or at least it looks like they're in reverse order because the majority of it is 2025 down to 2024. Now we're getting into 2023. Let's see how far it takes us to get to 2022. Wow, there's like a lot going on here. It's like clothing items and stuff like that. But then again, most of it's in January. So that would have been, right after his arrest and everything else starting to be processed. Now we're into 2022. We're going to continue down until we get to the day of the 13th and then the 14th, because the 14th is the date that honestly really matters here. Okay, here we get to it. All right. Here is where the knife sheath receives its inventory number. This is its item evidence number, 22M1810. Notice it says 11/14/22, but there's also things on here for the 13th. We have the CD of pictures, from Snyder. We also have some call logs down here that also have stuff from dispatch for the 13th. So the dates are supposed to be specific for the action. We have 23:57:47. This is 11:57 p.m. and 47 seconds on the 13th. And then it switches to 26 seconds after midnight on the 14th. That matters because what we've been told in recent interviews by the current police chief is that as soon as the sheath was found, it was taken over to the lab and instantly they began working on it.
that Sheath was immediately turned over, literally driven straight down to the Idaho State Police lab, forensics lab in Meridian, and handed directly to the specialists down there to begin work on it. And they started working on it immediately.
But this makes it seem as if it didn't actually get to the lab, get numbered, get put into the system until the next day. And for me, that's a huge issue. Now, if we go on to the Idaho State Police documents, remember how Dollinger, however you say his name, just said, oh, it was brought over to the lab in Meridian immediately, and they started working on it immediately. Well, then why does this say on supplement number 56, written by Chad Williford, that it didn't actually get there for them to work on it until November 16th of 2022? On November 16th, 2022, at approximately 8:36 in the morning, Corporal Williford of the Idaho State Police assisted the Moscow Police Department by transporting evidence related to an active investigation to the State Forensics Laboratory. I signed for and received one item from Casey Massey of the Moscow Police Department, an item 11 knife sheath in a sealed brown paper bag. I contacted Corporal Turrentine and informed him of the assignment and asked for his assistance. I transported the evidence south and met with Corporal Turrentine at the Idaho Transportation Department shed in New Meadows. I maintained custody of the evidence from when I received it until I released it to the custody of Corporal Turrentine. This is the 16th. We know that they collected, or at least we're supposed to believe, they collected the knife sheath on the 13th. So whenever you read the previous Moscow Police Report inventory list, you want to believe that the 14th is whenever they actually got it to the lab. But obviously, that's also incorrect once you dig into the further documents. What happened on the 13th with the sheath? Why do we not have anything dated for the 13th when it comes to the sheath? And if the sheath did not get to the lab until the 16th, what the hell was being done with it the rest of the 13th, all of the 14th, and all of the 15th? Where's that information? And I can actually go back to the Moscow Police Department records to prove that there is nothing out there to the public for the 13th of November regarding this knife sheath. This is a portion of my index for the Moscow Police Department records. As you can see here for supplemental number 8, written by John Rosinski, the first time that the sheath is mentioned is in this 8th supplemental, and it has nothing to do with the 13th. It says that he was informed about the sheath being found on the 14th. Not that it was found on the 14th, but that he was informed about it on the 14th. Again, there's nothing in here time-stamped and dated for the 13th when it comes to this damn thing. Now let's go back to the ISP reports so that we can take another look at what Talbott, who was assigned as the lead investigator for the ISP side of things, how he actually described the way that the blanket and the knife sheath were together on this bed. Supplement number 32, down on page number 93, is the very first time that the word sheath is mentioned in all of the 556 pages that were released from the Idaho State Police. In total, the word sheath is only in this entire document 3 times. That's it, 3 times. So let's go up so I can show you that this is from Talbott and show you the timeline issue that we found here. Because again, go back to the beginning of the video where the original story was put in front of our faces, telling us that Payne and Blaker, and again, Payne being the one they're putting all the responsibility on for finding the knife sheath, got to the scene at approximately 4 p.m. In Talbott's report, we are hearing, reading, and now understanding that Talbott is getting to the scene at 2:41 p.m. 2:41 p.m. At this point, Payne and Blaker are already at the scene. This is an hour and 20-ish minutes before the time that we are being told in all of the previous information that they actually got there. So why are we not being told the truth about something so simple and something that can be proven like a time? that someone got to the scene. Not only is there body cam, but there's dispatch out, there's dash cam, there's people at the scene with security logs. But if you look at the evidence logs, at the information that we've gotten from the Moscow Police Department supplementals, it shows that Talbott got into the house at around 5 o'clock, and that Payne entered around 5 o'clock, and that Jennings also entered around 5 o'clock. They both left around 5:23 together, while Talbott was still inside the house. Then we have Blaker and Payne going in together at about 17:28ish, which is 5:28, and then they leave the house or sign out on the security thing 2 minutes apart from each other. This has nothing to do with before 4 p.m. There is nothing that tells anyone a timestamp for Payne getting there previous to Chief Fry being told on the phone by Barrett that there was a sheath found at the scene. But I will also reiterate the fact that it does not claim in the portion of the book that says that from Chief Fry's interview that he was told that Payne was the one who actually found it. He was just told that one was found. Now, also in supplement number 7 from Moscow Police Department, we have John Lawrence claiming that he had Blaker and Payne going back to the police department in order to conduct interviews, and all of those apparently started around 1:48. Now, the timestamp for the Bethany Funk interview that was conducted by Blaker is 13:47, so that would make it seem as if as soon as he got to the police department, they were starting up the interviews. Now, we also know from the MPD documents that Lawrence Mowry is the one who ended up actually interviewing Dylan. So what was Payne doing while all of this was going on? If him and Blaker got to the scene at the same time and they were both told to come in and start interviews, who was he interviewing? Because I haven't found the document that says he was interviewing anyone that day. I'm just not really quite sure what he was really getting into during this time. Now, remember, I said that Talbott's report gives a description of how the leather knife sheath and the blanket were apparently placed together. And I don't mean placed in any other way other than the way that they were actually existing in the same space. Near Mogen's left hip was a tan-colored leather sheath partially covered by the comforter. So to me, partially means that it wasn't all the way covered up, that it was visible to the eye without having to remove the comforter because it is partially covered up. So was the comforter removed from actually completely covering up the sheath before Talbott entered the room and saw what he saw? Or was it always just partially covering up the sheath and somehow magically no one else mentioned it? This is a serious question. I'll also point out that Talbott and Payne's positioning of the knife sheath is on 2 different sides of Maddie's body if you read the documents. So Talbott's claims that it's near Mogen's left hip, okay? If we go to the MPD document, Payne's original technical narrative that has a shit ton more information in it than we ended up actually getting, and everything else that we've heard so far, it's that it was on her right side of the body. Now, again, Payne's, Blaker's, the copy and paste boo-boo, it all says when viewed from the door. But the only way that this would look different is if you were literally at like the head of the bed, all the way into the bedroom, near the head of the bed. But regardless of which way you're looking at it, the side of her body is not supposed to change. It's just like a mirror image. Just because it looks like it's the opposite doesn't mean it actually is the opposite. So why we have both left and right being mentioned in these documents, it's not surprising that there's so much inconsistency. Okay, that about wraps up all of the information that I was able to gather so far. And let's just keep this in mind. At the time that I'm wrapping up the recording on this video, it is September the 19th of 2025. We are well past the 2-month mark for not only the plea agreement, but also for the sentencing. And to this day, with all of the information that they have released to us so far, they have done everything in their power to stop the world from seeing the knife sheath. And they've also not produced the Amazon receipt. And I really have to question why. If it literally matches, copy, paste, clone, what was found at the scene, then why have they just not produced it? There is no trial. There's nothing to keep it secret for. Show us the photos. Show us the receipts. I just don't really quite comprehend what the game is all about. So the fact that we're still out here questioning literally everything is no one's fault but their own. They could easily alleviate a bunch of this if they would stop being such shady, secretive little clowns and do the right thing. This is absolutely ridiculous. But I want to know what you guys are thinking about all of these inconsistencies and all of the secrecy, even though we are way past the point of needing anything like this to be happening. Let me know down in the comments. If you like the way that I present this information and give my opinion, please don't forget to leave a like on the way out. Subscribe to the channel if you have not subscribed already. And please don't forget to make sure that that notification bell is set to all so you don't miss any of my rants, reviews, reactions, updates, or deep dives. See y'all.